All right. Welcome back, everybody, to the Veterans Beyond the Wire. I am your host, Tim Keller. Along with me is the co-host, Matt Disher. And we have another amazing guest. Matt has worked with this guy in the professional space, Mr. Jeff Hancher. We are excited to have you on, sir. How are you today?
I am well, excited to be on, excited about what you all are doing, and glad to be a part of it.
Awesome. Appreciate you coming on. Before we started recording, you showered us with compliments. You made us feel great about ourselves. You now do a lot of speaking about leadership, and I think that's a great trait of a good leader is to make the people around them feel good about themselves. And so,
no doubt about it. Very important.
So you started in the United States Army, is that correct? Was that your very first job?
Yeah, that was it. Outside of flipping burgers and cutting grass, that was the real first taste of employment.
Okay. And what did you do for the U.S. Army?
So I straight out of high school, really just a couple months out of high school, I took my first airborne flight ever, not airborne as we know it, but my first flight ever to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And I was on a mission to become an armorer. And obviously a lot happened along the way. I didn't really know what I was getting into, but I tell the story often looking back. The military literally saved my life. I'd love to tell you that I was full of patriotism, and I was. Don't get me wrong. Like seeing the first Gulf War and experiencing that as a sophomore in high school motivated me. But the reality was, I wasn't running to something. I was running from something. You know, I was running from a rough childhood, running from a bad friend group, all of these things. I just needed to get out, and this looked like a way to get out. I couldn't afford college. And so there I went, not knowing what I knew, thought I was big stuff, and got humbled pretty fast. So it was a great experience.
That's awesome. And then you got out of the military and started working in the corporate sector. And it seems like you found great success since then. You actually worked with Mr. Disher.
I did.
Yeah, I think that one of the ways that you and I got together, Jeff, was that we were both in that corporate space and both having that conversation about what happens after the military and how do people plug into that. And you and I connected in the same company, working in two different capacities, but you were in Pittsburgh. And I think, you told the story one time, and I'd love to hear it, pieces of it again, but you came out of the military, you started out kind of at an entry-level type of role, and you worked your way all the way up to sales leadership, right? Can you walk us through a little bit of that before we go into the conversation?
Yeah, I accidentally became very successful at the company, and I tell the story right out of transitioning from the military. I was going to take advantage of this GI Bill. I come from very humble beginnings. Neither one of my parents ever worked a day in their life. My dad battled bouts of cancer and chronic osteoarthritis, and my mom suffered from lupus basically since she was 10 years old. And so neither one of my parents ever worked a day in their life. So I knew if I was ever going to get to college, it was going to be through the military. I was 2 weeks from starting at a local university, and I got the call that I had gotten so many times from my dad, which was they're sending mom home in hospice. And not that you get numb to that, but you get used to hearing it. And, hey, Dad, sorry to hear that. Sorry. Let me know if I can do anything. And he said, well, actually, you can. He said, that's why I'm calling. Your brother has a career. I know how important college is to you, but I have to have a very serious surgery. I'm getting my leg amputated. I've been putting it off, taking care of your mom. But if I don't get this done, the infection is going to kill me. And so I did what both of you guys would do, put off college, went home, took care of mom. And, with the support of family, visiting nurses, I didn't want to be a burden. So I just was looking for a job. Mm-hmm. And I answered a newspaper article, there's my age, basically a truck driver picking up dirty clothes and dropping off clean ones. And I felt like that was really all I was qualified to do at the time. And in 1996, actually almost 24 years to today, I started as a fill-in truck driver at Cintas. And through their great leadership and great training and a whole lot of effort, I was able to get promoted 10 times before I transitioned to start my own business.
Well, Jeff, you mentioned you accidentally fell into to success. And I think at the end of that story, you mentioned it, it really wasn't an accident. It was your tremendous effort, really.
Sure.
You had these tools, you had this drive inside you. All you needed was that opportunity. And Matt and I have discussed before that when we both transitioned out of the military, there wasn't any of these LinkedIns, there wasn't these social networks. So yeah, it was you pick up the paper, you find the classifieds, and you might circle a couple things that possibly interest you, and you're like, I could probably do that. And
right.
It seems like
he plugged Jeff. You plugged into an organization that as you know, I mean, it has a ground up, bottom up sort of structure where you can start at the bottom and you can end up really anywhere you go and get a lot of great experiences therein. And the way you and I connected was we were doing some things with the Wounded Warrior Project in Pittsburgh. We were doing some. Are you still doing the Cornhole Classic?
Oh, yeah.
Still doing the Cornhole Classic.
I have that. I have that in my notes. You want to talk about that Cornhole Classic? I saw that on your LinkedIn page.
Well, yeah, I do. But real quick, I'll address the accident. The accident was finding a great company. That was all by accident. Yeah. That was luck if you would have it. Things could have went really bad, and we've seen that it go really bad for transitioning veterans. I accidentally found an amazing company. Now, the success that came with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, no question about it. So that was the accident. The Wounded Warrior Project, we don't support it, that organization anymore. We've brought it more local, but really that was it was an initiative through our company, of community outreach and being a veteran and being passionate and seeing a lot of veterans struggle and transition. I knew that's where I wanted to put my attention. And so we got a local company to build, to donate material. We had a local veterans from a local carpenters union build cornhole boards. We got a local venue donated, and away we went. In our first year, I think we raised $6,000, and we thought that was amazing. Since that time, we've raised deep into six figures and have built a few homes for homeless veterans, all by throwing some cornhole bags. And the community's really gotten around it. And I think great organizations and great people, they don't just talk about it, they be about it. And I think we have to do that more as professionals, as organizations. It's a great way to not just become the poster on the wall and get out there, get your sleeves up and make something happen. Adversely, partnering with those organizations has brought the organization some really good hires. And so it is reciprocal. And matter of fact, Matt was in one of the hiring expos with me with some of those organizations, because you start partnering and there's some synergies there that can happen. So not only is it a nice thing to do, but it's good for business.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And you and I had a handful of opportunities to sit on some different panels and have some different conversations. And I think, ultimately the goal was we're supporting the local veteran community, making sure that those men and women who are coming home with any different levels of challenges are plugged into opportunities and resources. But, one of the unique things that I always found about our conversations were that we were talking about how you can find success through work ethic. It doesn't always necessarily have to lean on the college degrees that you have and all of the experience and education that you have behind you, as much as it is, get plugged into an opportunity right now and get in there and hustle. So I always enjoyed that piece of the conversation when we'd sit down with these different warriors, these different service members coming back and giving them those pieces of advice that, get out there and find something good and hustle through it a little bit. And you can end up wherever you need to end up. Because most of my career success, I will say, was done. And I tell people this openly, was done without a college degree. I have one now, but most of the ramp up to where I was going after the military was done without that piece of paper hanging on the wall here behind my head. So always an interesting conversation to have.
Yeah. It used to be something that I still don't have my college degree. And it used to be something that I would hide, especially during introductions at big meetings. It was like, tell us where you're from, what college you graduated from. All of a sudden, I'd be in the bathroom, right? Let's get over this piece. But, again, another important thing in leadership is once you have a platform, you have a different voice. And now I spend my entire life inspiring and motivating people that maybe don't have everything perfectly done or the way that the world says it should be. Now, go get your education, but then get over it. Move
Right.
on. There's things that you have to do. But why I tell my story isn't to encourage people not to get educated, but to say it's not the end all be all. The dream's never the problem in my experience. If I were to put up 100 people and say, do you have a big dream? What is it? They can tell me what it is. It's the people that only dream and never execute. And why I tell my story and I'm so passionate about it is, if I can do it, anybody can do it. The road to success is paved with a lot of hard work, a lot of passion. The reality is most people aren't willing to pay the price. They can tell you every backup quarterback in the fantasy league and who's on the waivers and, how to throw a great dart into a bullseye. But they can't tell you anything about their business. They can't tell you anything about their product knowledge, their culture of their company. You need to start acting now like the person you want to become. Don't wait until you get there. Start acting now like who you want to become and become an expert. And when you become excellent in what you do, opportunity will come chase you down. And that has been my experience.
100%. 100%. This is why I love having conversations with you, Jeff, because every time I walk away feeling like $1 million and I'm going to go out and do something different today than I did yesterday. And I'm not kidding. I think you and I hit it off very well when we connected at Cintas, when we were working together. There was some instant synergy there. And I think we were about the same part of the same mission. And that was, in two different capacities in the company. But let's go spread the word a little bit. Let's go get these people who are looking for the next opportunity and kick them into gear. So
absolutely.
So another question that I have for you is the decision to step out of the corporate space and go work on your own. That's got to be scary. That's got to be something that you have to put a lot of thought into. And I know that a lot of people who are, for example, transitioning out of the military, look at entrepreneurship as a great opportunity, but more of them are stepping into corporate jobs, hourly positions and things like that. Mm-hmm. What do you say would attribute your success in your movement from the corporate space to working for yourself, to starting the Champion Forum?
Man, I'm going to tell you, this is going to sound cliche and fluffy and corny, but I'm going to give it to you as straight as I can. I kept thinking about regret. I couldn't shake regret. I couldn't shake thinking that I was going to be, an 80-year-old man looking back and wondering what if. This was a situation, Matt and Tim, that I wasn't running from something. The company I was at, I loved, and I was passionate about our culture and everything about it. Gratitude beyond what I can even begin to tell you. They took me from humble beginnings to great success. But, I start this podcast from the prompting of several people saying, Jeff, people need to hear what you have to say. People need to hear your story. People need to hear your teaching. And so I start this podcast. Then I hear I taught several trainings in my job. Jeff, you should do this. You should write a book. You should this, you should that. And it was like the world was telling me, maybe I have something that I can give. And I am passionate. Yes, I love breaking down a P&L. Yes, I love, all the succession planning. I love that stuff. But I'm passionate about people. I'm passionate about getting people to their biggest potential. And that became a burden for me. But I wasn't running from something. Matter of fact, I would tell you, was it scary? Actually, I'm going to tell the story for the first time ever publicly.
Awesome.
It was so scary for me. I ended up on prescription medication for high blood pressure. I passed out on a commercial flight because my blood pressure spiked. If my wife was on the show, she could tell you what that time was like thinking about this decision. I was walking away from a substantial golden parachute, substantial. And going into not knowing anything, going into not knowing what this was going to look like with this dream of being this international brand of helping people, the next John Maxwell. That's fluffy. But when that thing burns in you, here's what I know. When I'm 80, I'm not going to wonder. I'm not going to wonder what was going to happen. But I can tell you this, I have the pedal to the floor. And I will say, since December 13th, I don't know if I've ever been more fulfilled in my life. And if I had to do it over again, I would do it 10 times. That's not for everybody, but the stress, absolutely. But back to our point of being intentional, you can't just talk about it. At some point, you have to be about it. And I had several executives and colleagues and everything say, Jeff, what are you going to do? What if this doesn't work out? And I'd love to tell you guys on this show that I had a big exit strategy. And what if this doesn't work? And look at everything that you're giving up. Here's the big exit plan. If this doesn't work, I'm going to go get a job. Like, that's the plan.
Right.
I've had more opportunity job offers since I've left than I have the last 15 years probably, which is crazy. But yes, it was stressful. I don't think it's for everybody. I don't think everybody should jump, but I know what I was feeling in my heart, in my gut. It wasn't easy. It affected me physically. But looking back now, and we're not through it, because guess what happened in March? A pandemic hit the entire world. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this is insane. But it's just making the story better. And I feel greatly fulfilled. And I'm on a mission to help the world reach their fullest potential one at a time.
That's awesome. Well, I hope the blood pressure and things have started to calm back down.
I've never been better, Tim.
Oh, awesome. That is great to hear. It sounds like at one point you were dealing with crazy amounts of stress, and it's greatly affecting you. So it's good to hear that you're feeling better because of that. But let's talk about your company a little bit. I know you have a podcast you do. I'm currently on your website looking at thechampionforum.com. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, the website or the podcast is a little bit of the culprit of the transition, quite frankly. You know, I push this out, and in your mind, you always say, like, who wants to hear me talk? Like, it's a big world. I'm a small fish in a big pond. You know, who would ever want to hear me say anything? Well, the world spoke. You know, I hit new and noteworthy on iTunes the first 2 weeks, and this thing just started growing legs. And I'm like, oh my gosh, people actually want to hear what I have to say. And so the Champion Forum podcast has been a catapult, really, in me starting this business. It was another factor. And I go on there every week, and you know, I help people lead, inspire, and win at what they're doing. It does have a focus on leadership, and we have some great guests on there that I enjoy having on. And so as I'm thinking about this podcast, the kind of people that are reaching out to me, the kind of people that are asking for more information, I really built a business. You could call it a consulting business with a focus on leadership, but also business consulting. Really 3 areas. I help people with executive coaching. I help people with group coaching. So I do online coaching, a lot of Zoom, things like that, you know, masterminds that people can get into. But I also go into group spaces and do group coaching, everything from corporate culture to emotional intelligence to dealing with conflict, how to set proper expectations, hiring processes, all of those different things. And I do consulting, where basically I'll go in as an additional employee of yours as an executive leader and help the ownership or the executive leaders drive different initiatives, whether that's revamping their hiring processes or things like that. So it's really a 3-legged stool: consulting, training, and executive coaching.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
We were talking before the call, so I'm gonna go ahead and add along the bottom how people can, for anybody watching, I'm gonna go ahead and put your Instagram name on there, but also your website.
Great, thank you.
Website that's scrolling across the bottom there. Anybody listening who's not watching the YouTube live stream, it's thechampionforum.com, or on Instagram you can look for the Champion Forum. We were talking about some of the things that you put up, Jeff, on the way into the call, and this goes back to the piece that you're mentioning about making that switch from corporate space to being your own boss. Most stress comes from the way you respond, not the way things really are. Is that and that speaks true. I always talk about the anticipation of an event. My wife and I have a 9-year-old son. We talk about this quite a bit because they think in the moment, and I tend to think a couple of steps ahead in many cases. I like to pat myself on the back for that. But what I mean by that is that I realize that the event is typically not as bad as the anticipation. And anybody who's served in the military, and of course, anybody who's done some pretty amazing training in the military too, probably knows this. When you're about to slide down the rope out of a helicopter, it's pretty scary until you get on that rope. And then suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, I'm fine. Tell us about that. Is that part of the teaching of the Champion Forum? Is it getting people to start thinking like that, among other things?
Yes, it is. Absolutely. Mindset is critical. I've seen it. I've seen it propel people to the highest heights, and I've seen it take people out completely. And especially in a leadership capacity, what we know about leadership is there's going to be pain. There's going to be challenges. And I try to get leaders in a perspective of those challenges. And we have to understand that we're going to get paid in proportion to the problems we can solve. It's a fact. If you can solve big problems, you're going to get big pay. If you can solve big problems, you're going to get big opportunity. If you can solve big problems, you're going to get bigger platforms of influence. But guess what? Leadership is uphill, and you have to embrace that. And the greatest leaders, if we're thinking about them in our mind, Tim, you could rattle them off. Matt, you could. The listener could. One thing that you'll never say about a great leader that you want to emulate is they got rattled easily. That's never a trait of a great leader. Great leaders don't get too high on their highs, and they don't get too low on their lows. Even if it is a catastrophe, they process it. They don't wear it on their sleeve. And that quote that you read that I posted on social media, it was as a result of a client reaction that I had. And I tell people perspective is so important in leadership. It's critical. It's important everywhere. It's critical in leadership because oftentimes if we let our emotions get the best of us, we're not thinking logically. We're not processing change management well. We can often make bad decisions in an emotional state. And I ask people all the time to find perspective in every situation, even at its worst case. Because the reality is, for most of us, not all of us, there's somebody on this planet praying for our biggest problems. And when I say that, people are like, yeah, gosh, you know what? I was actually stressed and having anxiety about not being fully staffed. Somebody in this planet is praying that they had that problem and had an opportunity to be an entrepreneur, to have the resources to take the risk like I took. We got to find perspective in what these problems really are. These problems create pressure, but with the right mindset, the leader says, this pressure is a privilege because not everybody's built for this pressure. I'm in this role because I've earned the right to the pressure. And we have to understand that our teams are counting on us to perform, not when things are great, but when things are going bad. The saying that a smooth sea never made a great sailor, it's true in leadership, right? Mm-hmm. True leadership is built in adversity, not when things are going well. That's why in the corporate setting, I hated taking over high-performing teams. I want to take over the mess, the problem. I want to fix that. I want to get in there and fix that. And so I think there's something to be said about perspective in adversity, which is why I made the post.
Awesome. I like to call those people flatliners. When it's tough, their heart rate isn't rising. When things are going smooth, their heart rate's not dropping and they're not getting lackadaisical. It is even keel the whole time, no matter the situation. And like you mentioned, those people are the ones that when it does get tough and everybody else is panicking and don't know what to do, they look to that person because they're even keeled. They're going to keep their head on their shoulders and they're going to think with logic and make proper decisions. And I know in my role when I'm training people looking to be future leaders, I tell them, listen, you're going to make a couple hundred decisions every day, from the smallest to the largest decisions of the day. And it's just odds. You're not going to get them all right, but you have to make decisions. It is once you make a decision, you have to have the ability then to analyze those decisions, watch them begin to work, and quickly diagnose the ones that are probably the incorrect decision and have a way to correct those. Don't be scared of making incorrect decisions because they're going to happen. All of us are going to make incorrect decisions. It's how fast can you realize you've made one and how fast can you make the correct decision to change it?
So well said. So well said, Tim. And I get that question a lot from leaders because I talk a lot about decisiveness. And as a leader, you have to be decisive a lot of times. And a lot of times when chaos is happening, you have to be decisive, knowing you might not be making the right call. Very similar to a football coach. If there's 5 seconds left, you have no timeouts left, you got to make a call. It might be the wrong one, but you are in charge of making the call. So I have a lot of leaders ask me, so how do you become better at that? How do you become better at becoming decisive? And I would tell you it is through expertise and through muscle memory. And so how do you get that? I tell leaders all the time, you're going to fall into one of 4 camps as a leader. Camp 1, I hope it doesn't come up. Camp 2, if it comes up, I'll wing it. Camp 3, if it comes up, I'm ready to talk about it. But then there's Camp 4. If it doesn't come up, I'm bringing it up. Leaders that are decisive and have confidence, they live in Camp 4. Why? Because they have information and now they feel like it's their duty and obligation to say something. It would be no different than if you saw somebody laying lifeless on the ground and you knew CPR. You're running to that person because you have an answer to their biggest problem. As leaders, we have to do what it takes to get to Camp 4, because not only is the business mission expecting it, literally people's lives and their livelihood and what motivates them and their why is resting on how you lead. So we have to put the time in, we have to consume, we have to do whatever it takes to get into Camp 4. If it doesn't come up, I'm bringing it up. That will make you a decisive leader, and it will get you into a place that if it doesn't come up, I'm bringing it up because I have answers to the biggest problems. That's where we've got to live as leaders.
Right. You know, it's and to kind of summarize all of that is that, you know, in combat, for example, or in military leadership, the decision has to be made. A decision has to be made. We're going to be right or wrong. A decision has to be made when there's gunfire overhead or there's a situation at hand. This might be unprecedented. We might not have a training book behind this. It might be based on some of your experience, based on some of your hunch. But a decision has to be made versus doing nothing. And I think that that's something that we take from the military, what we take from other companies. I know, Jeff, when I was at Cintas, one of the things that I always liked about the organization was almost an encouragement to, in some cases, take a little bit of risk to make mistakes. Of course, the worst mistake that we make is the one that we keep making. You know, it's the one that we say, well, I made that mistake once or twice or 3 times. I'm going to keep going down that road. What advice would you have for, let's say, a young person coming out of the military, or let's say that they're not a young person coming out of the military, they've been in the military for quite some time. What advice would you have for that person in making their next steps when they're not really sure what the future looks like, or maybe they want to go into entrepreneurship, or maybe they want to go into the corporate space? Any pieces of words of wisdom for them?
Yeah. So, well, just to clarify, are they already in the position, or they're transitioning? They're trying to figure out what to do.
Coming out, figuring out next step.
Yeah, that's a big one. I would say do a lot of due diligence and validate what you hear, because a lot of people will put the badges of being a great veteran hiring agency, and they're not. Right. It's literally a poster on the wall. I do think there's organizations that you can get in touch with that can help you do that. But I think you definitely want to, if you're going to go the way of corporate, there's a lot of information out there. But I will tell you, and I didn't always feel this way, and maybe it is, again, back to my own transition, I think there's a big missed opportunity for veterans in the entrepreneurial space. And I think it's something that veterans should explore. There's an organization out there that I would highly recommend to veterans called Bunker Labs. And I just interviewed the founder of that. His name's Todd Connor. He just wrote a book that I'd recommend to that veteran that might be listening called The Third Shift Entrepreneur. And so I would get in touch with these kind of folks to kind of explore, what does being an entrepreneur look like? The great thing about veterans becoming entrepreneurs is they can create their own culture. Which, I mean, that's a great way to avoid that. One of our biggest challenges as veterans, into, transitioning into different cultures and things. Becoming an entrepreneur is great, and a lot of veterans, they have the grit, and that grit can get you a long way. Back to our earlier point, Matt, about working hard, outwork the competition. So I would absolutely tell every veteran that has any inkling of desire for entrepreneurship to explore it. Get with a Bunker Labs or folks like this. Matt, I introduced you to Rich Cardona. He has a great story. He went to Amazon, thought that was going to be the path, go corporate America, and just found out it wasn't for him, began his own business, and it's thriving. Mm-hmm. If you're going to go the way of corporate, I would say vet it out a lot and be prepared. I think one of the biggest mistakes veterans make is in the interview. I think they do a really good job talking about where they've been, all the awards they've had, what they did in the military, but where they miss is translating that into how it's going to help the company. Here's what I'm going to do. I would tell every veteran that is going to go the route of corporate, find that company, vet it out, do some research, ask questions to current veterans that might be there, find out who they are, and ask, hey, who else is here that has done what I'm about to do? Get that. At Cintas, we did different field rides. We had mentoring programs. What do they have there, and how can you tap into that? But back to the interview, don't just go into an interview talking about what you've done. You have to put a bow tie on that to let the employer know, and here's how it's going to benefit you, and be thinking about how you're going to impact that organization the first 90 days. And for that, I would recommend the book, The First 90 Days from Michael Watkins.
Very cool. Something that I had a conversation with somebody over the weekend along the lines of the interview. And it was, the cultural shift between military service and what the civilian and corporate world looks like. And what I mean by that is, and I was one of these, when I came out of the Marine Corps, I had this stone face in an interview. I'd show up with my, let's call it a tough guy persona. I don't know if I'm not at all like that today. But I think it was the culture of the Marine Corps, Marine Corps. And it's not just exclusive to the Marine Corps either, but the culture of the Marine Corps is aggressive and violent. It's a very aggressive, fast paced, tough persona type of place. And, when I came out, I didn't, Tim mentioned before, we didn't have the resources, and Jeff, you were coming out in the same era. We didn't have the resources like LinkedIn. We didn't have podcasts to listen to. We didn't have advisors. There was no way to connect to mentorship, which I want to talk about here in a minute, the value of mentorship. And so it was go out in the newspaper and circle jobs and then try to apply for them, drop off physical resumes. And this is going to sound crazy to anybody who is in that younger generation right now. Like, what do you mean drop off a resume? Wrote up a resume, put it in manila folders or manila envelopes.
Had to hand deliver it. And
drove around.
Like crazy people.
I mean, think about that today. And I'm in recruiting, and some of the old school recruiters talk about how they used to wait outside of office buildings to try to find like the accountant or the CIO or somebody like that and grab that person. It's nuts today. But I used to walk into the interview not understanding that I should have done my homework about said company, not understanding how I formulate my persona to act like them, if that makes sense. So stone face, walk into the interview. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Let me tell you, I blew things up and shot machine guns, and that doesn't work. And I can't tell you how many people I interview these days, interview or mentor, who are still thinking along those lines. They haven't adapted to the idea that they've got to get to know what happens out here, what companies actually behave like, because the stone face, stone wall doesn't work. You got to be able to talk about what you're going to bring to that organization and kind of how you're going to be their next big thing, Mentorship though. And I know that, we've all had mentors. Can you talk a little bit about that, Jeff? If you were going to talk about the value of mentorship or the value of listening to the experiences of others, which I think is what I've gained from some of your podcasts and some of our conversations anyway, is I love bouncing ideas off of other people, especially other like-minded people or people who've been in the same situation or similar situation. Can you talk about what you see as the value of mentorship or the value of just soaking up that knowledge with people who maybe have been there and done that?
Yeah, mentorship has changed my life. Literally changed my life. Going into this journey of becoming a professional, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I had great desire, which it starts with desire, but desire alone is not enough to get you to where you're going. I always tell people to surround yourself with people that have been where you want to go. And today, in today's world, with the likes of podcasts, social media, LinkedIn, websites, whatever, anybody can go out there and be a leadership consultant because they got the certificate over the weekend. Truly go out, whether it's you want to become an entrepreneur, you're starting out in corporate America, you're a transitioning veteran, and you're day one in the company. They don't have a mentoring program. Go seek those things out. It helped me so much along the way. And what the other thing with desire and proving that you have effort and desire, mentors want to come find you because they're like, I know that if I invest in this person, I'm going to get a return on my time. And so we should be always seeking mentors. And a great way to do that, I heard John Maxwell say this once. He said, every time you have an interaction with somebody, you should ask this question: who do you know that I don't know that I need to meet? It's amazing how you can build a network with that one question. But mentoring helped me most. It helped me my whole career, but it helped me most when I was making the transition from the blue collar truck driver to the white collar sales professional. Guys, I didn't own a tie. Forget about knowing how to tie a tie. When I went to the interview, I was praying that knot wouldn't come undone because I had it already noosed up and ready to go, just tighten it up. I didn't know anything about fashion. I didn't know how to speak correctly. I surely didn't know anything about how to run a sales process. And I had a couple of great leaders that came under me, saw the effort, saw the passion. They taught me everything from what shoes to wear with what belt to what a collar stay was. I didn't even know those things existed, to how to speak properly, to role playing. And so if you find great mentors, finding a great company is a good first start. But even more granular than that is finding a great mentor. And there's a big difference between mentoring and coaching. And I think it's important to address this. Mentors focus on progress. Coaches are task oriented. Mentors have long-term investment in you, where coaching is kind of short-term. Hey, make a quick left, run faster, whatever it might be. Mentoring is going to give you direct and explicit feedback, where coaching is more intuitive. And so you need both, yes, but you need a mentor because a mentor is going to have an emotional attachment. Go chase those down and don't say, well, I wasn't assigned a mentor. Nobody told me. Go get the mentor. It's your duty to go get the mentor and then give them everything that you have. It has propelled and shaped who I've become. If we could play the video of my childhood to where I am now, it's literally unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And yes, I read a lot of books, and yes, I consumed a lot of information, but you want to get around people that have been where you want to go. Start emulating them, how they speak, how they look. Great leaders, you feel them before you see them. How they carry themselves, that impact, that polish, we call it, that bravado, if you will. You get around it, you start becoming it, because leadership especially is way better caught than it is taught. You can't read a leadership book and then come out and give a keynote that's going to knock everybody off their socks. You got to get around it. It's like the game of golf. You can't read a golf book and then go play with Tiger. Like, you need to get around Tiger and see what he does and ask questions. And so mentoring is absolutely critical. Make sure that we're making it a two-way street.
That's awesome. Right. On thechampionform.com, one of the opening quotes on the page is "Dream big, be a champion." I think you mentioned this earlier about there's people that want to think about it, but then you have to be about it. So I think this is awesome that you do put dream big, but then you also put be a champion, because without any sort of action, there is no championship to win. So talk maybe a little bit about, taking those first steps towards a championship. It's okay to dream, but, if you have a dream, what are some of the first steps you would think are the most important to take?
Yeah, dream big's first, and why it is because we're better than we give ourselves credit for, I believe, most of the time. And my biggest dream as a teenager was to get into a great steel mill or coal mine here in southwestern Pennsylvania and make a big run at it. And quite frankly, fellas, that would have been amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Like I would have, even when I started in corporate America and I was making, $400 a week, I mean, I was balling. Like I actually bought a new vehicle, guys. Like, I mean, I was living life, living large. But so many times I think we set the bar so low and we become satisfied because we're better than we were. Mm-hmm. Well, what you might actually be is the cream of the crap. And that doesn't make you great. And that doesn't mean that you've reached your potential. That means you're better than everybody else. And so I think we have to dream big. I wish earlier in my career that I would have been like, hey, man, here's my potential. Here's where I'm going. Because I think I would have ran after it faster. I didn't really believe it. I couldn't even see it. And so dreaming big is definitely the beginning and the platform and the launching pad. Dream bigger than you think is even humanly possible, because you have that potential. And if it's a dream, if it's a desire in your heart, it's there for a reason. There's a difference between gifts and skills. Gifts, we get those. Skills we develop. The dream is the gift. Then we've got to execute. We've got to hone all those things. So dream bigger, big, dream big. But then comes the championship. They only put one gold medal on one person per event in the Olympics, only one. And if you think about the separation between gold and silver, it's not a lot. Think of swimming, right? Mm-hmm. It's not a lot, sometimes hundredths of a second. And it's what we do outside of the event that gets us there. But I'll tell you this, when you're on the gold podium and you have that gold medal hanging in your wall, nobody ever asked this question. What was the margin of victory? Nobody cares. I got the gold. And so if you want to become a champion, you have to do in private. If you want the big stage, you want to impress the multitudes, you got to do that in private. When you do it in private, it will give you the stage of the multitudes. That's how champions are built. Champions are built in the weight room, if you will. Champions are built in what happens outside of the event. That's why champions make what they do look effortless. And that's why they consistently win. They're bound by culture that they create, methods that they create to drive consistent results. And that's why the word champion means so much to me, because I believe every podcast episode ends with this line: you have been set up to be a champion in this life. Because I believe there's a champion for everybody, in everybody. And I believe every single person on the face of this earth has to contribute to the team. And I tell people all the time, we're counting on you to win. We need you to win. We need that gift in you. Be a champion in what you have been called to do. And so that's why I end it. And that's why the word champion is important to me.
Hey, Jeff, if you had to go back and talk to yourself when you were just a young buck leaving the military and stepping into the corporate space, what would you tell yourself? What conversation would you have with you?
That's a great question. I think it would be on the lines of what I just said about dreaming. Like when I was going to basic training, I was scared to death. If I can get real, I just had this conversation with somebody. I didn't go to the bathroom for almost 10 days, like wound up, like, I mean, scared. I'd never been out. I'd never left. Probably, I would say it would be 100-mile radius of my house, my whole life. Like going to the lake was a big deal for vacation. You talk about a fish out of water. What I would say to myself is, you should have dreamed bigger. Like, I wish I would have been like, this is phase one of what is going to be an amazing life. I was just scared to death and trying to survive. And sometimes we get into that survival mode but we need to be in that thrive mode. I wish I would have told myself, like, you're not here just to get through this. That was my mindset. Just get through this. Like, just pass the PT test, just get through the gas chamber. I wish I would have said, man, this is the launching pad for how you're going to transition from a thug back home, making bad decisions, getting in trouble with the law, and, growing up in poverty. This is the step. Like, this is the first step to thriving. I couldn't even see it. So dream bigger. The other thing I would say to myself is to deal with adversity better. In my life, there were a lot of setbacks, and they derailed me a lot of times. Again, if it wasn't for the military, I don't even know, because every time something would go bad at home, or, there was affairs and divorce and you name it, I would go off the rails. And so I wish I would have had a better idea of how to handle setbacks. One, I think we have to expect them. They're going to happen. This isn't Hollywood. Setbacks are going to happen. But I would tell myself too, to set a time limit for disappointment. 24 hours, throw the plates, whatever you got to do, then get over it. And I would have less emotion during setbacks and go after more information. That has helped me in my tenure as I become more mature, is back to not getting too high or low in the face of adversity. Go get more information. I would also tell myself, when those setbacks come, to rely on the now what. You're going to get kicked in the shin. Now what? Now what are you going to do? You're going to lay on the ground? What are you going to do to get back up and keep fighting? And lastly, I would tell myself to manage my self-talk. I wasn't good at that early. I would tell myself, you don't have a degree. You're never going to get there. You come from humble beginnings. If people really know where you came from, they wouldn't even give you a shot at this job. I would tell myself, when I got some of the bigger promotions, like, am I just fooling everybody? Do they really know who I really am? Then I started to realize who I really was. And that's when I knew, like, I had something, camp number 4, that I got to tell the world. So those are things that if I could play them over, I would have done them a lot sooner.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing some of the things that you've shared today, such as, you went back to, or going back a few minutes to the piece about leaving the corporate space and going out and striking out on your own here. A lot of people, myself included, I look at the successes of other successful people. I look at, people you see in the news all day. I look at the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezos and these different people. And what you see is the success. You see all the good stuff, all the money in the bank and all these things. But, Jeff Bezos, for example, recently went through a divorce. There's the dark side of the work there, and the stress. Jeff, you mentioned before, not only the stress of going out on your own, but then you mentioned again the stress of going in the military. I remember that. I remember showing up for Parris Island, or the days prior. I remember going on my first deployment with the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit. I had a pain in my stomach for what felt like 2 weeks, and I couldn't diagnose it. I didn't understand it. We don't talk about those things. We don't talk about, let's call it mental health. Let's call it the emotional toll of things in life. We tend to brush those under the rug. We tend to brush anxieties under the rug and pretend like everything's okay on the outside. And I think it's something, maybe through this podcast, maybe through these conversations in the future, we have more conversations about that this is okay. It's going to happen. It's something that I talk to every military transitioner about, is that the TAP programs prepare you to open a bank account and go get insurance and write a resume, but nobody ever tells you how much things are going to emotionally suck for a little while. You're going to sit in your car in a parking lot, banging on the steering wheel once or twice. There are going to be times where you just, as a grown man, you're going to walk back home and sit down on the couch and be like, I just want to cry for a minute. Like the world is caving in. And I think that that conversation for anybody listening is that these things happen. It's normal. It's not, we don't have to brush them under the rug. So I think, it's just a statement from some of the statements you've made, but what happens next for you, Jeff? What's your future look like? What are you doing? What's the outcome here? If we had to make it a movie, what's the end of the movie?
The end of the movie is, I would say this. I think a lot about my obituary, as morbid as that sounds. And I want to write it today. I don't want someone else to write it. I want to write it now. I got the pen in my hand. I want to write a little piece of that today. I want, when I walk out of this world, I want to know that I have made an impact. You see a lot of trophies in my bookcase here. And when I started thinking about this subject years ago, 5 years ago, I have 2 children. You know, we never talk about the wins with the president's clubs, the pay raises, the promotions. My kids really don't care.
Mm-hmm.
They're happy for me, but they don't care. And the reality is none of that stuff's going to be in my obituary at all. Nobody's going to care how many president's clubs I made, what successful business I built, whatever. People are going to remember how I impacted them. And this business that I'm building is to do that. Now, I'm not going to apologize to anybody. I plan to be very wealthy because I know when wealth comes into my hands, it can do great things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm never going to apologize. I will be one of the highest priced people doing what I do because I will have the biggest impact. But I want to walk out of this earth knowing that there are multitudes of people that are upset that I'm gone and that are glad that I was here. And so that's how the story's going to unfold. If I could write a Hollywood movie about it, that's it. Would I love to be on a stage with, 100,000 people? Absolutely. Fly in on a zip line and fireworks shooting and all of that. I would absolutely love that. And I dream about that stuff. But it's kind of like the starfish for me. You know, the starfish on the beach, they're not in the water and they're dying. I can't save them all, but I'm going to throw as many in there as I can. And everyone that I throw in, I want them to look back and say, man, I appreciate it. So I want that to be my story.
That's awesome. Jeff, I've taken a ton of notes today. The cream of the crap. I really liked that one.
That's the hashtag for you right there.
That is the one.
Because you've mentioned multiple times that dream big, dream beyond what you think is even possible. So if you're at a place that you never thought you'd get to, begin to dream beyond that. It's tough to say this, but look at everyone else there on that same level with you as that crap. Become the cream of that crap and then go find the crop. Where's the crop at? Let's go find that crop. And then that's the new crap and we'll become the cream of that. And we just keep on moving. But another one you mentioned earlier that I wrote down, and I think it's a great way to end this episode is, Jeff, who do you know that I don't know that I need to meet?
There are three people that both of you need to meet and every listener needs to engage with. And I would say EF Overwatch is a company every veteran should get to know. They're doing amazing things. Mike Sorelli and George Randall there. I have a book coming out called The Talent War for every employer that's listening that needs to make better hires. I would say that's a connection that needs to be made. Rich Cardona is he's an up and coming media person that helps people with their personal branding, and he has an amazing transition story. I would say he's somebody that people need to connect with. And Michael Watkins, this might be personal for me, but his book, The First 90 Days, really changed my career. And when I think of veterans transitioning, I think I referenced him earlier, actually. He was on my podcast a couple of weeks ago. We recorded, but he's an amazing leadership teacher, and that book transformed my life. So he's definitely somebody that I would say that people absolutely need to connect with, his teaching and his material. Those are three that come to my mind right away.
It's awesome. Jeff, absolutely amazing. Like Matt said earlier, every time he's spoken with you, he goes out and does something great that day. I feel the same way right now. One last time, thechampionforum.com, the Champion Forum podcast. Where else can they find you, Jeff?
LinkedIn under my name, Jeff Hansher. Obviously, the Champion Forum podcast, my website, the Champion Forum. That's how you can find me. I'd love to connect with you, whether it's via a DM, maybe an email, being part of one of my leadership groups. I'd love to connect with the masses. So I appreciate the opportunity, fellas.
Oh, it's all on this end, man. You were absolutely amazing guest. You've inspired me. I'm going to start to dream even bigger. So thank you, Jeff, for coming on. If you guys want to reach out and hit up Jeff, he's let you know where you can find him. You can find his podcast. Again, you can find our podcast. We live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope. You can find us on all your major podcast platforms. We are Veterans Beyond the Wire. And until next week, we'll see you then.